Nat, thank you so much for joining me today on the Surf Football Focus chat. Really, really excited to talk.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks for having me.
It's been a while. It's been a while. We had a good catch up there. Obviously, we're going to take this direction of the conversation to the growth with. Well, we might go to a bit of college at the end of it, but at the start, we'll go to your work with Puerto Rico. Let's talk about the growth and the progress. I mean, I had it down in my notes, but I didn't have the context of where you were. So 173 in 2021 to 81 today
Yeah.
in the world spots. How on earth do you do that?
Well, I mean, the funny thing was I was in the fall of 21 just minding my own business, and I get this call, and I thought it was a scam, to be honest with you. I was like, who are these people calling, and I'm doing my own thing in a small school, and so it just grew, and I'm Puerto Rican. My dad was born there. My mom is Puerto Rican. Her parents were Puerto Rican. So I've been in the culture. So they found me somehow through our heritage and stuff, and called me, and I wanting to coach at the highest levels. It was exciting opportunity on top of it being Puerto Rico. So, but yeah, I took it kind of very, very blind. I brought in Carlos Juarez as my assistant coach, and he's been, an unbelievable, asset, just because, he's been with U.S. national teams, working with some big coaches. So I go, there's going to be stuff I step into that I don't want to step into, and he can kind of guide me along, and it's been great. It's been a great relationship, and he's still with me, and with the full team. It's been quite a ride. And I think to get from where we were to now, it's been, you've got to play games, but it's funny because there's some countries that will go up and their rankings improve without playing in windows. So Puerto Rico at the beginning was just trying to play games, and we're trying to play games that we can win, obviously. And then we started kind of, we've played, the record since I've been there, it's 19, 11, and 7. But of those losses, we've lost to Mexico 4 times, so it's kind of like the powers, right? Canada, Mexico, and US, you're expected to lose. But the last result we had against Mexico was 2-1 in Toluca. And we scared them because we scored first. And then the big bear woke up, and then and then we were packed in. But where I'm going with this is we've played enough games to win that other countries have wanted to play us during the FIFA window, so the quality of the opponent has increased. And the best result and most exciting results that we had was we did the qualifiers for Gold Cup, and we got ourselves into a play-in game. And the play-in game at the time was against Haiti. Well, Haiti had just come back from a World Cup. So sure enough, we're playing Haiti for a play-in game for the Gold Cup, and the expectations were super low. We end up winning 1-0, get in the Gold Cup, and then face Brazil, Colombia, and Panama. And had a great showing there. We lost to Brazil 1-0, beat Panama 2-1 in a 90-plus minute goal. And then we lost to Colombia 2-0. But that put us in a tie in every category with Costa Rica, who was in the other group. And it literally came down to a coin toss. Like that's how they proceeded to get the quarterfinal, to get in the quarterfinal. And in retrospect, it was a bummer, but we were tired. We had played our play-in game, and obviously the other opponents, the other teams that had qualified through to the quarterfinals, they just played their normal tournament game. So, but that was the biggest result that jumped us up huge numbers, that tournament, Gold Cup. And then we just recently played Estonia and Iran twice, and we beat Estonia, we beat Iran, and tied Iran on the second. And so we went from 85 most recently to now at 81. So
Wow,
it's been amazing.
That's amazing. I know you're a humble guy, so you're not going to tell me that that it was down to coaching. But there's got to be. I mean, that's a big gap. And obviously, when you're playing against higher level opposition and you're in that journey, there's a culture shift as well and a mentality shift. What are some things that you can put your finger on internally that you've changed since coming in, or that you've made progress, or is it recruitment, or what's happened?
I think it's a little bit of everything. When I first got there, the biggest thing that stood out to me was, let me back up a little bit. A lot of, I would say half of the roster was from the island, and the other half was recruitment, from the States. And whatever they were used to, the training environment was very slow, was very relaxed. It's our nature, right? The island, it's like very chill. So just instilling just them understanding that, football's a transition game, and everything you do has got to be fast and calm, but fast. And so just changing that and just setting some standards in that regard. And then just helping them understand, like, if you're organized, you can be a problem to most teams, And so that was one thing. And just helping them just to understand, like, if you're organized and you're confident and you can, we don't have the resources to have 7-day camps, like these other big federations have. So recruitment was, can this player, they obviously got to be athletic enough and technical enough, but can they in 2-3 training sessions implement what I'm asking? And you can't go in with this big plan. You have to go in with, okay, we're going to focus on 2 things. And hopefully if they implement that on game day, we look like a team that's been together for a bit. And then the next camp you have, if you can have the same players again, now all of a sudden you can hit those 2 that you worked on last one and maybe add 1 more and just continue to grow it. So it's not anything that I had planned, but I just understood, like, I've only got 3 days with them before we got to play Brazil or Haiti. And so it's like, let's just focus on our strengths and do a couple things that we can, be a problem for them. And it's worked. And obviously the recruitment piece, to your point, you got to find players that can implement something quickly, which means they've got to have a football brain, which means they've got to understand, and be a team player. It's not a club where you can develop it over months in preseason and you start to grow it that way. So it's a different kind of approach, I guess.
Brilliant. Well, when I was putting these questions together and I was thinking about, again, playing against you in college, I still have some of my nightmares that playing against your Riverside team. Really, really agree. You're talking about the team, really, really aggressive out of possession. There's always a real strong collective focus, I felt, about your teams in and out of possession. But you mentioned there about how hard that can be with a 2 to 3 day camp. So, I mean, what are some ways from a coaching standpoint that you try and get that through in a short time period?
Well, it's in the selection of the team. First off, you got to find, hopefully you can get returners, right? Ones that have been in the system. So it helps. And the other advantage that I had early on, and I'm going to regain that advantage, is I was also the U20s coach. Mm-hmm. So obviously, because the federation is, limited with coaches and resources, me being able to coach the 20s and then call in some of them to the full team, which we did for the Gold Cup. They already knew who I was. They already knew the language. They already knew the ideas. So that's going to, if that continues, that will continue to be helpful. There's a few countries out there that have one coach for the 17s, 20s, and the full team. And I think that's probably a way to hack the system to be able to look like a team that's being developed, when in reality it's just you had them when they were younger. And if they are, fortunate enough to get called into the senior team, then all of a sudden it's not a shock, except the speed of play and that kind of thing. But leading into that, we send out who's available. And then once we know who's available, I'll send out a fitness calendar, because you're not going to get them fit in 3 days, and you gotta track them and make sure they've been playing and they're fit at some level. So for us, we're not going to be a high pressing team, for 70 minutes or 80 minutes, whatever it's going to be. We have to be smart, but they've got to be fit enough to chase the game a little bit. And so it's on them. We had probably 80%, 20% college players to pros when I first got it. And now it's flipped. now we've got, like this coming up window, I've got probably 17, 18 pros that we're calling in, and they're playing in Mexico. They're playing in the USL. They're, one or two are playing in the NWSL. So it's not like they're just playing in random leagues. It's good quality leagues that they're playing in. So that piece, because they're pros, the fitness level that I was concerned about at the beginning, being all college players, is less of a concern. Now it's just, can you adapt? Can you implement what we're asking you to do?
Yeah, it's fascinating. The piece there on you talked about the kind of expanding the recruitment landscape from player opportunities, and a big part of the conversation obviously here is opportunities for US based players. When you're looking at the players who are eligible and you're making that initial assessment and getting an eye test on them, what are some things that you look at and say this is what they need to have in order to play at your level?
I think there's got to be a level of aggression. Do they have a personality on the field? And then technically you've got to be sound, because the shocker at any level, right? You go from level 1 to level 2, and as you graduate up the levels, it's the speed of play becomes the shocker, and it's because they're fitter and they think faster, and their technical speed is just, better than what you're used to seeing. So, just trying to find people with personality, and obviously, you've got to piece a team together. If you've got a six that likes to distribute, but isn't, the strong tackler destroyer that you need in that position. Now all of a sudden you got to, are you going to play with 1-6? Do you need to play with 2 6s? So there's no real answer, but I think to get them on the radar, you got to have a personality and technically be competent, and you got to show something that you do really well. I think that's, you want to build your team around everybody's strengths and not hide, anything from a player as much as you can,
You said something really interesting there before about the short window of time prep, is that you need players with intelligence, game intelligence to come in. That's something that, with your experience in the US is something that's a big talking point at the minute with this player intelligence. Where do you think we are with that in terms of progress, or where can we grow in that there?
I think it's getting better. I think there's, soccer, you can see it anywhere now. You can find a game anywhere. And I think piecing that together with their games and their trainings over, throughout the weeks, if they're a club player, youth player, they're just watching more football. And the ones that watch more football understand football. And if they watch a player that they like, now all of a sudden they're trying to copy them. Or if a coach asks them to do X, all of a sudden they're like, okay, well, I know what that looks like because I've seen enough. And I just think that, is there still room to grow? Absolutely. But I think the players are watching more. You're hearing in the locker room a lot more about them watching a game that they just saw and reacting to it, which, back when I was at Riverside, that was not the case. So I think that's going to be the development piece. Is just, it's a culture of football, and that's obviously the U.S. That's the challenge, right? Because MLS is doing good, NWSL is growing. Now they're, now the USL on both sides of men and women, now they're trying to create, more opportunities, which then means there's more football to be seen. And I mean, now you can watch it, any game across the world now,
Absolutely. That's a great point. How does an international away trip differ from a college away trip?
Well, at the full team level, like for instance, we went to Turkey. Well, that normally would have been a problem. I know it was a problem for me because I'm in Arizona, but before it was like you'd bring all the college players in, and so now you've got time change and you got, food, and everything's just so different. Well, now because the pool has reversed 80-20, we've got, of those 17 pros that I mentioned, we've got, I don't know, about 12 that are playing in Europe somewhere. So we just met in Istanbul, and then that was where we met. And then from there, took our plane into the location. And then we were there for 2-3 days before, one, to acclimate just to the surroundings, but really just one, to get our legs under us, and then 2 to plan for Estonia, who was our first game. So I think every window is different. Like the Gold Cup, for instance, we actually had 5-6 days in San Diego before our opponent. So I think like anything else, it's what's important is the event, how important that event is. And, they've been able to resource us to prepare properly, better than a Turkey trip where it's like we all show up and put on our boots and here we go. With the younger teams, we'll have more of a camp because obviously it's the U20s coming up are CONCACAF championships, which means that, there's 4 spots to get into the World Cup. So those, I think they'll value the event and just see like, okay, how important is this? And the time prior to that is, obviously given consideration.
As more information starts to, and hopefully encouraging players to look at this pathway and be aware of this pathway of being US based and playing for different national teams, and obviously at Surf we've got quite a few of them, just at different ends of different nationalities that they're involved in. For a coach sitting listening to this, well, I have 2 questions for you. Advice for a coach who thinks they have someone who might be eligible, and advice for a parent who is looking, and we're talking young here, Nat, we're talking, 14, 15, 16, so like on the cusp of starting to work on the national teams. What's your advice?
Well, for us, we've got Daniel Saletti, who's our sporting director. He's done a really good job of connecting with he works on both sides. It's a big job for him. So, I'll get emails sent directly to my college email. I'll know somebody who knows somebody, and so that's how a lot of it's been. But one is we don't know, there's not this database of, hey, there's 20,000 Puerto Ricans in the ECNL or the GA, it's like, we don't have that. And I think at some point that needs to be probably developed. And then as far as the parent, at least for us, and I got to imagine it's standardized, but it's a grandparent or closer that makes you eligible. So without us knowing that, unless we get an email or a coach mentions it, that's a little bit how it gets kicked off. And then after that, it's following up with just like college recruiting, follow up with, hey, I'm playing here, hope you're there, sending the highlight film. We've brought in a couple invitees with a little bit less of a, like we played the Cayman Islands, I want to say 2 windows ago. So, the opponent is somebody we can beat, but it's also an important camp to bring in some from fresh faces and see if they can fit in and do what we're asking them to do. But I think the first thing is if you're eligible for a country, I would, for me, it's kind of different because I'm a college coach, which is unique. So it's like you can find me, out on the recruiting fields, recruiting for Arizona, but at the same time, they know I'm doing that. But I would just try and reach out. And that was the hard part before I got the job. People would reach out to the Federation and kind of go into cyberspace, and never get anything back. But I think it's a lot more organized. We've got a database of players. We got a database of video. So I think that's where the start would be, is letting us know, letting the countries know that you are, eligible and considering, wanting to play for them.
It's actually quite inspiring to hear that there's, that with a little bit of not initiative, but like, you've got to, similar to what the college game used to be, didn't it? You got to work your emails and kind of get in front of people and get your clips together. And
yeah,
that's really good to hear that still works.
Oh, it still works. It still works.
When you're, let's stay on then the college piece then about Arizona. Let's look at, because obviously there's players that are in that pathway as well, or really want to get in that there. Leagues have changed and they're still changing every week, it seems.
Yeah.
What are some things that you would tell a young player, again, looking at freshman, sophomore at high school, who do have aspirations to play at the level of Arizona?
I think I just kind of talked about it, right? I think it's the initiative piece, getting yourself out in front of the coach, being persistent with, not necessarily a ton of emails, but I think the first email is introduced. And then I would just say, keep your emails on that same thread, because, we get tons and tons of emails. So, they're very very likely could get lost in the shuffle if it's not connected to something else. And then, like, you don't know who's out there. Sometimes the coaches will say that they're going to be at, certain event, and some don't, and so it's like, if you have a school in mind, I would assume they were not there, and then just follow up. Hey, didn't see you at XYZ tournament. I was there. Here's some clips from that tournament in case you weren't, and then that can start at least keeps that person in the radar and keeps us in the loop, because there's just too many players to track. And then as far as what we're looking for, I think it's no different, right? You want somebody with a personality. You want somebody who within their team structure, because every youth club plays differently. And that's hard, because if the coach just looks at, she can only do this, well, maybe that's what the coach is asking him to do, so that's where, if there's a personality attached, if there's technique attached, you can kind of see that. The tactics, I think, the player is limited into what they're playing with and playing who they're playing for, which is there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the context of the player that you're looking at. And then, if you play a different way than the club team plays, now all of a sudden it's like, can they adapt? Are they good enough technically? And do they watch enough football? Do they have enough of a brain to be able to say that they could fit into our system?
I love it. There's definitely been an evolution of video. You've mentioned video clips a few times. There's video clips as in me playing in my backyard, and there's a video clips with more context. Talk about the types of video clips that you kind of want to sit down and watch.
I think it's trying to get the coach a known quantity. So, like, we'll get a ton of international clips, video clips, but we just don't know what the level is. We don't know who they're playing against. So they might be running by players, but you just don't know how athletic the person is because it's on video. So, whereas in the States, ECNL, GA, all the leagues that are out there, there's known quantities, right? And so, Team A played Team B. Well, if they're, in the league at all and they've done well, now you know what the context is. So that's helpful, is getting game film. I would make it diverse with the number of teams you show on your clips, because if you smash a team 6-0 and you scored 4 goals and the same opposition uniform keeps showing up, like, well, maybe that was just a fantastic day for you. So just making sure those are diverse, because we've seen, a 3-minute video and it was against 2 teams, and one team was 2 minutes and 30 seconds of it,
Yeah, you're looking, you're thinking, what happened to the gap in that other game then? Was that you have to come up injured?
Exactly.
We talked before about the landscape changing in college, and obviously quite a bit, and even the basketball coming up, and you look on LinkedIn these days and you see the type of money. As a parent coming in, let's just say I come in and talk to you in a recruitment meeting, and I say, listen, I want, tuition, the scholarship, and I'd like 4 million for the year. But I mean, in all seriousness, how should a parent approach college, those official and unofficial meetings now? Like, how should they, without completely ruining it by asking for too much?
Yeah, that's I'll be honest, that's a loaded question, because it is so new still. It is so fresh. I think even a lot of the programs, the footballs and the basketballs, different world, right? But when you talk about the Olympic sports, it's so new, and you've never had a gymnast, or you've never had even soccer players getting, I'm gonna use this term and it doesn't mean anything, but getting pro money, and so now, if I don't think it's any different for parents and families. I don't think it's any different now than it was 10 years ago. And the reason why I say that is everybody was chasing something, right? Everybody was chasing something. So I think the advice that's always been out there is making sure, one, your daughter, your son is passionate about what they're doing, because if they're not passionate about what they're doing, you're going to drop them off, and they're going to be, that they become their own motivation, Like it's not anybody else pushing them aside from the staff and the program they're in. But if they don't want to give 100% effort at training, well, there's nobody's there to tell them to pick it up like you did as a parent while you're sitting on the sideline saying, hey, what's going on today? You just don't get that as much, So they got to be passionate about what they're doing. If don't chase it, I think the chase is part of the passion. And I think, whether the money's there or not there, there's a level for everybody. And I just think, I'm going to go back to the Puerto Rican national team. We've got players that played on D2 schools that were very, very good that are showing up to my every FIFA window. And it's just, they're just late bloomers. And if you just shy away from those schools and those opportunities to be able to play consistently, you may miss out, because, you may be on the bench in a top 20, or you may be able to play a lot of minutes in a top 100, and if you're passionate about it, that means you probably want to grow, which means you need to play. And I think there's a level for everybody, but you're right. The landscape's changing. So where the focus is, your legs can only run for so long. So they want to cash in now, and that's a hard thing to navigate as a coach talking, because, we're recruiting no different than what we were recruiting before. It's just now all of a sudden the incentives have changed.
Great answer. It's a great answer. It's like you were practicing that. Last one. This has been fantastic. Last two for you. You mentioned a couple of times on the personality of the player being a big component. With that kind of visit and the player, because that's obviously part of it as well, fitting in a culture and aligning to a culture. When that player comes on to campus and they're, you spend a little bit more time with them, and you get a little bit more of an appreciation of their personality. What type of things in the personality are you looking for in that visit?
I think when I mentioned personality with the recruitment on the field, I'll go there first, but then I'll talk about the visit. Is just, what do you bring to the table on the field? Are you chasing every ball out of bounds? Like I remember this funny story, but amazing story. I ended up recruiting her and brought her into UCR. Was she played for an average club team and an even worse high school team. And so, but I liked her in her club environment. So I went to go watch her high school, and she goes, Coach, don't come. Please don't come to my high school game. I'm like, I'm coming to your high school game, because I wanted to see what they look like under adversity, like when it's not great. And this girl was, and it was right. I went to the game. It looked like a over 30 league. It was a very low level high school team and what was being done there. And lo and behold, their ball went out of bounds. She's chasing everything down, getting back into play. Like, I just had to watch 20 minutes, and I knew she was competitive and she didn't want to lose. And that was the person I wanted on my team. So that's what I saw on the field. Off the field with the visits, I think obviously fitting in. Every coach knows their own team, and it's like, is this person going to ruffle feathers, or are they going to be able to be their own person yet understand they're part of something bigger? And you hear the old cliches, which is true. How do you treat your coaches? How do you treat your parents? And those kind of things, and those personality things. You want somebody who's confident, because I think that shows up on the field. You need confidence on the field, but a lot of times, I was more of a quiet introvert, but as soon as I stepped over that line, it was like I was on stage, and my personalities didn't really match, but I was competitive enough that I understood where to use that competitive spirit. And I think if that line gets gray, then I think you run into some personalities that are hard to deal with and hard to get along as far as in a team environment. But it's, I don't know if that's the answer or clear enough, but that's my take on it.
Fantastic. And then last one for you. Next 6 months for Puerto Rico, what does it look like?
Well, like I mentioned before, I got the 20s and the full team. That's my responsibilities now. So the 20s are going to the CONCACAF Championships late May. Our group is Costa Rica, ourselves, U.S., and I want to say Well, that's it, because there's four. There's four teams per each group, and then the other group obviously has Mexico and Canada. So we were fortunate enough to avoid that draw. So Costa Rica will be probably the game, right? Costa Rica will probably be the game, and because they take top four. So all you got to do is end up top two in your group. So it's us and Costa Rica most likely. I'm being confident we'll be fighting for the 2 spot, because you have to assume that the U.S. obviously is going to take the number 1. So that's what's going on with the 20s, and then the full team has an event in Guatemala. They got two friendlies in Guatemala. Again, an opportunity for the FIFA rankings to kind of be affected by that. And Carlos Juarez will be taking that team while I'm with the 20s. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, here, now that we've got the connection, we will we'll keep in touch, and hopefully we'll have some surf players in a World Cup game for Puerto Rico very soon.
That'd be awesome.
Fantastic. Now, thank you so much. Wishing you all the best, and great to catch up. I've loved it.
Thanks, Gary. Appreciate it.